Welcome to Mystic Sleep Tales. Now allow yourself to rest. Whatever you've been carrying throughout the day, let it slowly and naturally begin to lose its effect on you, like a leaf falling from a branch in the still air of an autumn evening. Allow your shoulders to relax. Feel the weight of your body where you rest, and notice how the bed or pillow welcomes you, holding your shape as if it had been waiting for this moment all day. If there are still thoughts swirling in your mind, that's perfectly normal. You don't need to chase them away. Let them pass over you, just as clouds move on their own in a wide, clear sky, leaving no trace behind. Tonight, your thoughts are not you. You're simply here, resting, breathing, allowing the silence to envelop you like a soft, familiar blanket. And as you lie here, your breaths deepening and your limbs heavy with the pleasant weight of rest, perhaps you may allow yourself to drift, not yet asleep, but to an edge of somewhere between the waking world and the gentle darkness beyond, a place where stories live and the mundane things of life acquire a kind of silent beauty. Let us go there together now, you and I, slowly and unhurriedly, stepping into a small, ordinary room of a city that existed long before the world you know tonight, that IT is evening in England. The year, if we were to place it anywhere at all, belongs to an age when the post was carried by horse and rail, when the glow of a gas lamp was still a relatively new companion to the London street, and when a letter, sealed and stamped and sent upon its way, was something of a small occasion. The penny post had changed everything. Where once a letter might cost a laborer half a day's earnings to receive, now it could travel from one end of the country to the other for the price of a single copper coin. And with that change, with that sudden, gentle democratization of the written word, had come a need, a vast and quiet need, for envelopes. Not the grand, ornamental envelopes of the stationery houses, with their embossed crests and mourning borders, but plain, simple, practical envelopes. Envelopes by the thousand. Envelopes by the tens of thousands. Envelopes enough to hold the letters of a nation that had, almost overnight, discovered the pleasure and the comfort of writing to one another. And so we come to a small workroom, tucked above a stationer's premises on a narrow lane not far from the river. The lane has no particular fame. It is one of those countless little thoroughfares that thread through the older parts of the city like the veins of a quiet leaf, too modest to appear on most maps, too familiar to those who walk it daily to warrant any remark. The buildings on either side lean gently towards one another, as though engaged in some long and companionable conversation that began many decades ago and shows no sign of ending. The workroom itself is on the first floor, reached by a staircase of bare, worn wood, each step hollowed slightly in its center by the passage of feet over many years. The door at the top stands ajar this evening, as it often does, for the room tends to grow warm with the steady work of hands and the low heat of the small coal fire that burns in the grate at the far wall. The fire is not large. It is the sort of fire one might barely notice, a modest arrangement of coals that gives off just enough warmth to keep the chill from settling into the fingers, just enough glow to add a faint amber undertone to the light that fills the room. That light comes chiefly from two sources. There is a gas lamp fixed to the wall beside the window, its flame turned low so that it gives a steady, even illumination without the harshness that a brighter setting might produce. And there is a single oil lamp set upon the work table itself, its glass chimney faintly clouded with the residue of many evenings, its wick trimmed with the sort of unconscious precision that comes from long habit. Together, these two sources of light create a warmth that is less about temperature than about atmosphere, a golden, unhurried kind of light that seems to slow everything it touches. The room is not large, but it does not feel cramped. There is the work table, which occupies much of the center, its surface scarred and smoothed by years of use. The wood darkened in places where ink has been spilled and imperfectly cleaned, lightened in others where the constant pressure of hands and paper has worn it to a pale, almost silvery grain. Upon this table, arranged with a kind of quiet order that suggests both practice and care, are the materials of the evening's work. There are stacks of paper, flat, rectangular sheets of a cream-colored stock, cut to size earlier in the day and now waiting in neat piles at the far end of the table. The paper is of moderate quality, made from a blend of cotton and linen rag, and it has a certain softness to it, a willingness to yield beneath the fingers that more modern papers, stiffened with wood pulp and chemical sizing, would lack entirely. Each sheet has been cut to the same proportions, and though there are slight variations in shade from one to the next, the pale, even tone of the paper is remarkably consistent, a testament to the care of the mill that produced it. Beside the paper, there is a small pot of paste, its surface covered with a square of dampened cloth to prevent it from drying out. The paste is simple, made from flour and water, cooked slowly and stirred until it reached just the right consistency, thick enough to hold, but thin enough to spread cleanly with a brush. The brush itself rests across the mouth of the pot, its bristles still faintly damp from recent use. And there is the bone folder. This is the most personal of the tools upon the table, a slender instrument carved from a length of cattle bone, polished smooth by years of handling until it gleams with a soft, muted luster in the lamplight. It is perhaps 6 inches long, pointed at one end and gently rounded at the other, and it fits into the hand with the easy familiarity of a thing that has been held and used 10,000 times. The bone folder is the essential companion of anyone who works with paper. It creases without cutting, presses without bruising, and in the hands of someone who knows its character well, it can produce a fold so clean and precise that the paper seems almost to have been born with a line already in it. The person seated at the table this evening is a woman. She is neither young nor old, though her hands have the look of hands that have known steady work for many years, the skin smooth but firm, the fingers deft and sure in their movements, the nails kept short and clean. Her hair is gathered simply at the back of her head, a few loose strands catching the lamplight, and she wears a plain dress of dark wool, practical and unadorned, with sleeves that have been turned back neatly at the cuffs to keep them clear of the paste and paper. Over the dress, she wears an apron of coarse linen, its front marked here and there with the faintest traces of paste and paper dust. Her name, if it matters, is Ada. But names are not important tonight. What matters is the work and the room and the quietness that fills both like water filling a bowl steadily and without effort. She reaches for the first sheet of paper. Her left hand draws it from the top of the nearest stack with a motion so practiced that it barely seems to involve thought at all. The fingers finding the edge, lifting, guiding the sheet across the surface of the table until it lies flat before her. For a moment, she regards it, not with the scrutiny of someone checking for flaws, though she would notice any flaw instantly, but with the simple, settled attention of a person about to begin a task she has performed countless times before, and which she will perform countless times again. The sheet is a diamond shape, or rather, what might more properly be called a rhombus, wider than it is tall, its 4 points corresponding to the 4 flaps that will, once folded, become the body and the seal of the envelope. This is the standard form for the hand-folded envelope of the day, a design that has been in use since the early years of the penny post, and which, despite the growing prevalence of machine-made envelopes, is still produced by hand in small workshops like this one, for there remain customers who prefer the feel and the finish of a hand-folded article. And there remain stationers who are willing to pay a modest sum for the assurance of that quality. Ada takes up the bone folder in her right hand. The gesture is so natural, so entirely without deliberation, that it might be compared to the way one picks up a pen to sign one's name, the hand knowing already where the instrument lies, the fingers closing around it with the certainty of long acquaintance. She positions the sheet, aligns its edges by sight and by touch, and then, with a single, fluid motion, brings the bottom point of the diamond upward, folding it over and along a line that runs precisely through the center of the sheet. The paper yields. There's a soft sound, barely a sound at all, more of a feeling transmitted through the fingers as the fold begins. And then the bone folder follows, drawn along the crease with a steady, even pressure, not too heavy, not too light, the polished bone gliding across the paper and leaving behind a line so clean and sharp that it might have been scored by a ruler. The fold is perfect. The edges align. The paper lies flat and obedient beneath her hands. She pauses, though not because the work demands it. The pause is simply part of the rhythm, the way a breath is part of the rhythm of breathing. In this pause, the room seems to settle a little further into itself. The fire shifts in the grate, a coal subsiding with a sound that is more felt than heard. The gas lamp on the wall gives a faint, barely perceptible flicker, then steadies. Outside the window, which looks out upon the lane below, the rain has begun. It is a gentle rain, not the driving, insistent rain of a storm, but the soft, steady, patient rain of an English evening in the cooler months, the kind of rain that seems less to fall than to simply arrive, appearing upon the glass of the window in fine, silver beads that catch the lamplight and hold it for a moment before sliding slowly downward. The sound of it is a whisper, a continuous, barely audible murmur that mingles with the quiet of the room and becomes part of it, as though the rain and the silence were made of the same substance. Ada listens to the rain for a moment, or perhaps she does not listen so much as she allows it to be present, the way one allows the warmth of a fire to be present without actively thinking about heat. Then she turns the sheet, brings the right hand point inward, folding along the next line, and again the bone folder follows, pressing, smoothing, sealing the crease with a motion that is both deliberate and effortless. There is something deeply restful about watching hands at repetitive work. Perhaps it is the rhythm, the way each movement follows the last with the same unhurried certainty, like the ticking of a clock or the slow turning of a wheel. Perhaps it is the absence of urgency, the knowledge that this work will be done not quickly but well, that each envelope will receive the same care and attention as the one before it and the one that will come after. Or perhaps it is simply the quietness of it, the way the work asks nothing of the voice, nothing of the mind beyond the gentle, half-conscious attention that the hands themselves seem to supply. The left-hand flap comes next, folded inward to overlap the right, and the bone folder makes its passage once more, a smooth, gliding stroke that presses the paper flat and true. The sound of it, the bone against the paper, is extraordinarily soft, a whisper within a whisper, barely distinguishable from the silence around it. And yet it is there, if one listens carefully, a tiny, rhythmic susurration like the sound of fingertip drawn across silk. Now the envelope is nearly formed. The bottom is folded up, the sides are folded in, and only the top flap remains, the flap that will eventually be tucked in or gummed down to seal the letter within. Ada folds this final flap with the same quiet care, pressing it gently into place, and then runs the bone folder along each of the creases once more, reinforcing them, ensuring that the folds will hold their shape, that the envelope, when it is finally picked up and filled and sent upon its way, will open and close as smoothly and as naturally as a hand opening and closing around a familiar object. She sets the finished envelope aside, placing it upon a growing stack at the corner of the table, and reaches for the next sheet. The motion is seamless. There is no moment of transition, no pause between one envelope and the next that might suggest the beginning of something new. It is all one continuous flow of movement, like a river that passes the same bank again and again without ever being the same water. The rain continues at the window. A gust of wind presses itself against the glass for a moment, then passes, and the rain resumes its steady, patient fall. Somewhere below, in the lane, a footstep sounds briefly on the wet cobbles, then fades. A door closes distantly. These are the sounds of the evening drawing in around this small workroom, the sounds of city settling into its quieter hours, and they arrive like small, gentle visitors, present for a moment and then gone, leaving the room no less still than it was before. Ada folds the second sheet. The bottom point rises. The bone folder descends. The crease appears, clean and true. The right-hand flap turns inward. The left follows. The top flap settles into place. The bone folder makes its final, reinforcing passes. The envelope joins its companion on the stack. The third sheet is drawn from the pile. There's no thought of hurrying. The day's obligations, whatever they might have been, are behind her now. The stationer who employs her, a quiet, particular man with ink-stained fingers and a fondness for good paper, does not set quotas or demand a certain number of envelopes per hour. He knows, as she knows, that the value of hand-folded work lies not in its speed, but in its consistency, its care, the small and invisible qualities that distinguish it from the product of a machine. The machine may fold faster, may produce envelopes by the hundred where she produces them by the dozen, but the machine cannot feel the grain of the paper, cannot adjust the pressure of the fold to accommodate a sheet that is slightly thicker or slightly thinner than the one before it, cannot sense, through the tips of its fingers, that a crease is not quite true and needs to be corrected before it sets. And so she works at her own pace, which is the pace of the work itself, the pace that the paper and the bone folder and the quiet of the evening seem, between them, to determine. It is not a fast pace. It is not a slow pace. It is simply the pace at which this particular thing is best done, and there is a deep, restful satisfaction in that, a satisfaction that has nothing to do with achievement or accomplishment, and everything to do with the simple act of being present in the doing. The fire in the grate has settled lower now. The coals have arranged themselves into a compact, glowing mass that gives off a steady, even warmth, and the occasional small sound of a coal shifting against its neighbor is so familiar, so much a part of the texture of these evenings, that it registers less as a sound than as a kind of punctuation, a gentle comma in the long, flowing sentence of the night. Ada reaches for the paste. The brush lifts from the pot with a small, faintly adhesive sound, and she applies a thin, even line along the edge of the flap, just enough to hold when pressed, not so much that it will seep through the paper or leave a visible mark when dry. The brush moves with the same unhurried precision as the bone folder, and the paste itself, pale and faintly translucent, disappears into the paper almost as soon as it is applied, leaving only a slight darkening along the edge that will fade entirely as it dries. She presses the flap down, holds it for a moment, feeling through her fingertips the moment when the paste takes hold, and then releases it. The envelope is complete. It does not look like much. It is a small, ordinary, cream-colored envelope, the sort of thing that one might pick up without thinking, address, fill, seal, and send on its way without ever considering the hands that made it. And that in its way is exactly as it should be. The best work, like the best service, is the work that goes unnoticed, the work that simply does what it was made to do, quietly and without fuss. The rain has found a new rhythm now. Or perhaps it is simply that the earlier rhythm has deepened, the drops falling a little more slowly, a little more heavily, each one arriving with a soft, distinct tap against the glass before merging with the thin film of water that slides continuously down the pane. The lamplight catches these rivulets and transforms them into something almost ornamental, tiny, moving lines of gold and amber that trace their way downward like the slowest, most patient form of handwriting. If you are still awake, that is perfectly well. There is no need to sleep just yet. Let the story continue to hold you, as gently as the lamplight holds the room. Let the sound of the rain and the quiet rhythm of the work be a kind of companion to your breathing, something soft and steady and undemanding that asks nothing of you but your presence. Ada folds another envelope, and another. The stack at the corner of the table grows, slowly and evenly, each new envelope settling upon the last with a soft, papery whisper. Her hands move in their familiar patterns, and her eyes, though attentive, have that quality of calm, settled focus that one sees in people who are deeply absorbed in something they know well, a focus that is not effort but ease, not concentration, but a kind of quiet communion between the self and the task. The room smells of paper. It is a clean, dry, faintly sweet smell, the smell of cotton and linen rag that has been beaten and pressed and dried and cut, the smell of something that was once cloth and is now something else entirely, something meant to be written upon, to carry words across distances, to hold the thoughts of one person and deliver them into the hands of another. Mixed with this is the fainter smell of the paste, flowery and mild, and beneath that the warm, mineral smell of the coal fire, and beneath that still, barely perceptible, the smell of the rain, which is no smell at all really, but a kind of freshness, a coolness that seeps in through the gap beneath the window frame and mingles with the warmer air of the room. The bone folder gleams. Each time Ada lifts it from the paper, it catches the light for a moment, a pale, smooth gleam that is there and then gone, like the flash of a fish turning just below the surface of still water. She has had this bone folder, for many years. It was given to her by the woman who taught her the work, a woman whose name she sometimes speaks aloud in the quiet of the evening, though never loudly and never with any particular intention, only as one might speak the name of a person one has loved and who is no longer present, softly and with a kind of gratitude that does not need to be explained. The clock on the mantelpiece, a small, plain clock with a round face and Roman numerals, marks the passing of the minutes with a sound so quiet and so regular that it has long since ceased to register as sound at all. It is simply part of the room, like the table, like the lamp, like the stacks of paper, a presence that measures nothing that matters, for in this room, on evenings like this, time does not matter. There is only the work and the rhythm of the work and the gentle, accumulating silence that gathers around the work like snow gathering on a still field. And so the evening continues. Sheet by sheet, fold by fold, crease by crease, the envelopes take shape beneath Ada's hands, each one a small, precise, unremarkable thing, and each one, in its own quiet way, a kind of proof that the simplest acts, done with care and patience and attention, carry within them a peace that no grander enterprise can match. The rain falls, the lamp burns, the bone folder glides, and the night, unhurried, gentle, and infinitely patient, wraps itself around this small room like a shawl and holds it close and asks nothing at all. Ada sets down the bone folder for a moment, not because she is tired, but because her hand, of its own quiet accord, reaches instead for the cup of tea that rests at the far edge of the table, just beyond the reach of any stray paste or paper dust. The cup is a sturdy thing, white with a faint blue line around its rim, the sort of cup that has been used and washed and used again so many times that its glaze has developed a fine network of tiny cracks, like the map of some infinitely small and peaceful country. The tea within it is no longer hot. It has cooled to that particular temperature at which tea ceases to be a drink one must be careful with, and becomes instead a simple, mild comfort, something warm enough to be pleasant, but cool enough to be held without thought. She lifts the cup and takes a small sip. The tea is plain, unsweetened, brewed from the same blend of black leaves that the stationer's wife purchases each week from the grocer on the corner of the high street. A modest blend that makes no claim to fineness, but which produces a reliable, even-tempered cup, dark enough to have body, but not so strong as to be bitter. The taste of it is familiar as the weight of the bone folder in her hand or the feel of the paper beneath her fingers, and she holds the cup for a moment longer than the sip requires, her fingers resting against its sides, absorbing the faint warmth that still lingers in the clay. From her seat at the table, she can see the window clearly. It is a sash window, its frame painted a color that was once white but has aged over many seasons to a soft, uneven cream, not unlike the color of the paper she folds. The lower pane is slightly raised, just an inch or so, enough to allow a thread of cool, damp air to enter the room, carrying with it the sound and the smell of the rain. The upper pane is fixed, and upon its surface, the rain has traced and retraced its patient lines so many times this evening that the glass seems almost a shimmer, the lamplight beyond it fractured into 1,000 tiny, moving points that shift and merge and separate again in patterns too complex and too gentle to follow. She watches the rain for a moment, not with the active attention of someone looking for something, but with the passive, receptive gaze of someone who is simply allowing what is there to be there. The lane below is quiet. Most of the shops along it closed their shutters an hour or more ago, and the few windows that still show light do so dimly, through drawn curtains or half-closed blinds, as though the buildings themselves are preparing for sleep. A puddle has formed in the slight depression where two cobblestones meet, and the rain strikes its surface with a rhythm that is almost, but not quite, regular, each drop sending out a tiny circle of ripples that expands for a moment before being overtaken by the next. She sets the cup down and returns to the work. The gesture is as smooth and as unremarkable as all her other gestures this evening, a simple turning of attention from one quiet thing to another. Her left hand finds the next sheet. Her right hand finds the bone folder, and the folding begins again. There's a particular quality to the paper this evening that she notices, not for the first time, but with the kind of renewed awareness that comes from long familiarity with a material. The sheets were delivered yesterday from a mill in Kent, one of the smaller mills that still produces paper from rag rather than from the wood pulp that has become so common in recent years. Rag paper has a character that wood pulp paper cannot replicate. It is softer, more yielding, more willing to accept a fold without resistance. And yet it holds that fold with a quiet tenacity, the fibers of cotton and linen locking together along the crease as though they had always been meant to lie that way. It does not crack or split along the fold line, as cheaper paper sometimes do. It is not yellow or grow brittle with age. It simply endures quietly and without complaint, like a good servant or a well-made chair. Ada can feel the quality of the paper through her fingertips as she works. Each sheet tells her something, though she could not easily put what it tells her into words. This one is slightly thicker than the last, requiring a touch more pressure from a bone folder. That one has a faintly rougher texture on one side, where the rag fibers were not quite as evenly distributed during the pressing, and she turns it so that the smoother side faces outward, the side that will eventually bear the address. These are not decisions exactly. They're more like responses, the kind of automatic, bodily knowledge that comes from having performed the same task, with the same materials, in the same room, evening after evening, for more years than she has any reason to count. The bottom point of the diamond rises. The fold is made. The bone folder descends, glides, presses. The crease appears. The right-hand flap turns inward. The left-hand flap follows. The top flap settles. The bone folder makes its final passes. The envelope is set aside. Another sheet is drawn. And in the spaces between these movements, in the small, quiet intervals where one motion ends and the next has not yet begun, the room breathes. That is the only way to describe it. The room breathes. The fire exhales a faint warmth. The lamp exhales its steady, golden light. The rain exhales its soft, continuous murmur against the glass. And all of these exhalations mingle in the air of the room and become a single, unified atmosphere, a kind of gentleness that is not imposed, but simply present, the way warmth is present in a sun-touched stone or coolness is present in the shade of a summer tree. If your eyes are growing heavy now, that is a welcome thing. Let them close if they wish to. The story will not leave you. It will go on quietly, steadily, in the same room, with the same hands and the same rain falling outside the same window, and you may listen or you may drift and either way is perfectly well. The story asks nothing of you. It only offers itself, the way a fire offers warmth, without condition and without demand. The stationer's premises below are silent now. Earlier in the evening, there have been the faint sounds of the stationer himself moving about in his shop, the creak of a drawer being opened, the soft thud of a ledger being closed, the occasional murmur of his voice as he spoke to his wife, who helps him with the accounts. But those sounds ceased some time ago, and the building below has settled into the particular kind of quiet that an empty shop possesses after hours, a quiet that is not absence but presence, the presence of all the things that fill the shop in that wait, patient and still, for the morning to bring customers and conversation and the small transactions that make up the daily life of a modest enterprise. The stationer keeps a good shop. His shelves are stocked with writing paper of various grades and sizes, from the thick, creamy sheets favored by those who write formal correspondence to the thinner, more practical sheets used for everyday letters and notes. There are pens, both steel-nibbed and quill, arranged in trays lined with felt. There are bottles of ink in several colors, though black remains by far the most popular. There are blotters, pen wipers, sealing wax in red and black and green, and small brass seals with initials and devices carved into their faces. And there are envelopes, of course, envelopes of every size and description, including the hand-folded envelopes that Ada produces in this room above. She does not think about the shop as she works. She does not think about the customers who will eventually purchase the envelopes she is folding, or about the letters those envelopes will carry, or about the hands that will write the addresses upon them, or the hands that will open them at the other end. These are things she knows, in the way one knows that the sun will rise or that winter will follow autumn, but they do not occupy her thoughts. Her thoughts, such as they are, belong to the work itself, to the paper and the fold and the smooth passage of the bone folder along the crease, and to the small, immediate satisfactions that each completed envelope provides. There is a satisfaction in neatness. There is a satisfaction in precision. There is a satisfaction in the way a well-made fold lies flat and true, without any tendency to spring open or to pucker along the line. And there is a deeper satisfaction still, one that has less to do with the quality of any individual envelope than with the act of making itself, the slow, steady, accumulating sense that something is being done and done well, that the hours of the evening are being given over to something useful and real, something that will exist in the world after the evening is over and the lamp is extinguished and the rain has stopped. The paste pot requires her attention for a moment. She lifts the dampened cloth that covers it, dips the brush, and stirs gently, working the paste to ensure that its consistency remains even, that no lumps have formed along the edges where the mixture meets the air. The paste is a simple thing, flour and water, nothing more, but must be made correctly and maintained carefully if it is to do its work. Too thick, and it will leave ridges beneath the paper, visible to the touch even if not to the eye. Too thin, and it will soak through the paper, leaving a damp, translucent patch that weakens the fiber and spoils the appearance of the finished envelope. The right consistency is something one learns not from instruction, but from experience, from the thousand small corrections and adjustments that accumulate, over time, into a kind of instinct. She replaces the cloth over the pot and returns to the folding. The brush applies its thin, even line of paste along the edge of the flap. The flap is pressed down. The fingers hold. The pace takes. The envelope is done. Outside, the rain has neither increased nor diminished. It continues with the same quiet, unhurried persistence, as though it has made a kind of agreement with the evening to keep its pace, to neither rush nor linger, to simply be. The sound of it has become so thoroughly a part of the room's atmosphere that Ada would notice its absence far more than she notices its presence. It is a sound that fills without crowding, that accompanies without intruding, and it has the curious property of making the silence around it seem deeper and more restful than silence alone could ever be. A coal falls in the grate. It is such a small event, the slight subsiding of one piece of fuel against another, accompanied by a brief, faint hiss as a pocket of trapped gas escapes, and yet it sends a momentary flicker of brighter light across the room, a quick, warm pulse that illuminates for an instant the underside of the mantelpiece, the edge of the coal scuttle, the surface of the table where the lamplight does not quite reach. Then the coals settle, the flicker fades, and the room returns to its accustomed glow, unchanged and unperturbed. Ada does not look up. Her hands continue their work. The fold, the crease, the smooth glide of the bone folder, the turn, the fold again. There is a meditative quality to these repeated motions, a quality that is not unlike prayer, though it asks nothing and addresses no one. It is simply the body doing what the body knows how to do, and finding in that doing a kind of rest that is deeper and more nourishing than idleness could ever provide. She has been doing this work since she was a young woman. She learned it from Mrs. Coates, a widow who had run a small paper folding concern from a room not unlike this one, in a lane not far from here, and who had taken Ada on as an apprentice when Ada was scarcely more than a girl. Mrs. Coates had taught her everything. Not just the mechanics of the fold and the crease, though those were important, but the deeper things as well, the patience, the attentiveness, the willingness to let the work set its own pace rather than trying to impose a pace upon it. Mrs. Coates had believed that good paper folding was a matter of temperament as much as of skill, and she had been right. The hands must be willing to repeat the same motions without growing impatient or careless, and the mind must be willing to settle into the rhythm of the work without demanding distraction or variety. These were not lessons that Mrs. Coates had stated in so many words. They were lessons that Ada had absorbed over time, the way one absorbs the character of a room by sitting in it often enough, or the way one comes to know the temperament of a cat by living with it for years. They were lessons carried in gesture and example rather than in language, and they had taken root in Ada so deeply that she could no longer separate them from her own nature. The patience was hers now. The attentiveness was hers. The willingness to let the work be what it was, without trying to make it more or less than it needed to be, was hers. The stack of finished envelopes has grown appreciably. There are perhaps 4 dozen now, arranged in a neat, squared pile, their edges aligned, their surfaces smooth and flat. In the morning, Ada will carry them downstairs and place them on the stationer's counter, where he will examine a few, as he always does, holding them up to the light, testing the folds with his thumb, checking the paste line for evenness. He will nod, as he always does, and place them in the glass-fronted cabinet behind the counter, alongside the envelopes from the previous evening and the evening before that. And in time, a customer will come in, a clerk or a solicitor's assistant or a merchant's wife, and will purchase a packet of them, and will carry them home, and will sit down at a desk or a writing table, and will take one from the packet, and will place a letter inside it, and will seal it, and will write an address upon it, and will send it on its way, never once thinking of the small, warm room above the stationer's shop where the envelope was made. And that, as has been said, is exactly as it should be. The clock on the mantelpiece continues its quiet measure. The hour is growing late, though lateness in this room, on this evening, is not a thing one feels as pressure or urgency. It is simply a quality of the air, a deepening of the quiet, a slight thickening of the darkness beyond the window glass. The lane outside is entirely still now. No footsteps, no closing doors. Only the rain, falling steadily, patiently upon the cobblestones and the slate roofs and the narrow sills, and running, in thin, murmuring streams, along the gutters towards the drains. Ada folds another envelope. The paper whispers as it yields to her touch. The bone folder traces its path. The crease sets true. She turns the sheet, folds again, presses again, and the small, quiet sounds of the work repeat themselves as they have repeated themselves all evening, in a rhythm that is as steady and as soothing as the beating of a resting heart. There are moments in the course of this work when the boundary between the person and the task seems to dissolve, when the hands and the paper and the bone folder become a single, flowing process, and the woman seated at the table is not so much doing the work as being done by it, carried along by its rhythm the way a leaf is carried by a slow current. These are the moments of deepest quietness, the moments when the room and everything in it seems to reach a kind of equilibrium, a perfect, still balance between effort and ease, between attention and rest. This is one of those moments. The lamp burns, the rain falls, the bone folder glides, and the evening, deep and soft and boundless, holds all of it together. The room, the work, the woman, the paper, the fire, the rain, in a single, gentle embrace that asks for nothing and gives everything. And the envelopes continue to take shape beneath hands that know their work so well that the work itself has become a kind of dreaming. Let hold you to this quietness. Let it settle into your breathing and your bones. Let the sound of the rain become your rain, falling on the roof of whatever place you rest in tonight, and let the rhythm of the work become a rhythm inside you, steady and slow and infinitely kind. There is nothing to do. There is nowhere to go. There is only this, the fold, the crease, the glide, the pause, and then again the fold, the crease, the glide, and the soft, continuous murmur of an English evening that has no wish to end and no reason to hurry towards any conclusion at all. Ada reaches for another sheet. The paper is cool and smooth beneath her fingers. She positions it, aligns it, lifts the bone folder, and begins. The sheet folds as all the others have folded, with a soft compliance that seems almost willing, as though the paper understands what it is to become and offers no resistance to the becoming. The bottom point rises to meet the center. The bone folder traces its familiar line, and in the crease that appears, clean and straight and certain, there is something that might, if one were inclined to notice such things, be called a kind of contentment, the contentment of a material fulfilling the purpose for which it was made. Ada's hands are warm from the work. Not hot, not uncomfortable, but warm in the way that hands grow warm when they have been steadily occupied for a long while, the blood moving easily through the fingers, The muscles of the palm and wrist relaxed into the particular state of readiness that comes not from tension, but from use. She can feel the slight tackiness of paste residue on the pad of her left thumb and the smooth, dry polish of the bone folder against the curve of her right palm. And these sensations are so familiar to her, so much a part of the texture of her evenings, that they register not as separate things, but as a single, unified feeling, the feeling of being exactly where she is, doing exactly what she does. The room has grown imperceptibly warmer in the last half hour, or perhaps it only seems warmer because the air outside the window has grown cooler. The thread of damp air that enters through the gap beneath the sash carries with it now a deeper chill than it did earlier, the chill of a night that has passed fully from evening into its later hours, when the stones of the city release the last of the day's warmth and the air between the buildings settles and stills. Ada does not rise to close the window further. She's accustomed to this progression, this gradual cooling of the world beyond the glass, and she finds in it a kind of companionship, as though the night itself is drawing closer, leaning in, keeping her company as she works. The paste brush requires rinsing. She lifts it from the pot and carries it to a small basin of water that sits on a shelf beside the grate, a plain white basin with a chip on its rim that has been there so long it has lost its sharpness, the broken edge worn smooth by the passage of many hands. She swirls the brush gently in the water, watching the pale threads of paste dissolve and disperse, turning the water faintly cloudy for a moment before the particles settle. Then she taps the brush lightly against the rim of the basin, once, twice, and returns with it to the table, where she lays it across the mouth of the paste pot as before. These small interruptions in the flow of the work are not interruptions at all. They are part of the work, part of its rhythm, the way a rest in a piece of music is not silence, but a particular kind of sound, a sound that exists in relation to the notes around it, and that gives those notes their shape and meaning. The rinsing of the brush, the stirring of the paste, the occasional adjustment of the lamp's wick, the sip of tea, these are the pauses between the folds, the breaths between the creases, and they belong to the evening as fully and as naturally as the folds and creases themselves. She returns to the paper. A new sheet, drawn from the stack with the same quiet, practiced motion, laid flat upon the table, its diamond shape oriented with the longer axis running left to right. She regards it for the briefest of moments, her eyes taking in the color, the texture, the slight grain of the fibers visible beneath the surface, and then the bone folder rises in her hand, and the work resumes. There is a particular sound that the paper makes when it is first touched by the bone folder, before the fold is fully begun, a sound so faint that it exists at the very edge of hearing, like the sound of dust settling or the sound of light falling upon a surface. It is the sound of contact, of one smooth thing meeting another, and it lasts only an instant before it is replaced by the slightly louder, slightly fuller sound of the fold itself, the soft, continuous whisper of paper yielding along a line of pressure. Ada hears this sound, though she would not call it hearing. It is more a kind of feeling, a vibration transmitted through the bone folder and into her hand, and from her hand into the quiet center of her attention, where it registers not as information, but as confirmation, a confirmation that the work is proceeding as it should, that the paper is behaving as paper ought to behave, that the fold is clean and the crease is true. The finished envelope joins the stack. The stack is substantial now, a thick, even column of cream-colored paper that rises from the corner of the table with a quiet authority, the sort of authority that belongs to any collection of identical, well-made things. Each envelope in the stack is indistinguishable from the others, and yet each one was made separately, individually, by the same pair of hands performing the same sequence of motions. And in this paradox, this combination of sameness and singularity, there is something that might be called a small, quiet miracle, though Ada would never use such a word. She would simply say that she has done her work, and that the envelopes are ready, and that it is getting late. But it is not yet time to stop. There are still sheets in the pile, still paste in the pot, still oil in the lamp and coal in the grate, and the rain still falls, and the night still holds, and the room is still warm and quiet and filled with its gentle, golden light. And so she continues, because continuing is what the evening asks of her, not with urgency or insistence, but with the same soft, steady patience that the rain brings to the cobblestones and the lamplight brings to the glass. If you're drifting now, let yourself drift. There is nothing to hold on to and nothing to let go of. The story will carry you, or the silence between the words will carry you, or the sound of the rain, imagined or remembered, will carry you, and all of these are the same carrying, the same gentle, downward motion towards rest. The bone folder has developed, over its many years of use, a patina that no amount of polishing could replicate. It is not the bright, even shine of a new tool, but something deeper, more complex, a luster that seems to come from within the bone itself, as though the years of contact with paper and skin and paste and lamplight have been absorbed into its substance, and now radiate back out in a soft, amber glow. The pointed end, which Ada uses for scoring lines and opening folds, has worn to a fine, smooth taper, and the rounded end, which she uses for pressing and burnishing, has developed a gentle concavity where her thumb most often rests, a small, shallow hollow that fits her thumb as precisely as a glove fits a hand. She turns the bone folder in her fingers for a moment, absently, the way one might turn a familiar stone or a smooth piece of sea glass, feeling its weight, its balance, the way it sits in her hand with such easy, undemanding rightness. Then she sets it to the paper again, and the fold begins, and the sound begins, and the rhythm resumes, steady and slow and certain, like the pulse of the earth itself, felt through the floor of a quiet room on a rainy night in a city that is slowly, gently, falling asleep. The gas lamp on the wall gives a small, soft hiss, barely audible, the sound of the gas passing through the narrow jet before it meets the flame. It is a sound that has been present all evening, so constant and so quiet that it has become indistinguishable from silence, a kind of undertone to the room's atmosphere, like the hum of a sleeping cat or the murmur of a distant stream. The flame itself is small and steady, a pale blue at its base, deepening to gold at its tip, enclosed within a frosted glass shade that softens and diffuses the light, casting it evenly across the room without harsh shadows or bright spots. The shade has a pattern etched into its surface, a simple design of leaves and tendrils that was fashionable some years ago and that Ada has never particularly noticed, though she has looked at it or through it nearly every evening of her working life. The oil lamp on the table provides a warmer, more intimate light, closer to the work, closer to the hands. Its flame is smaller than the gas lamp's flame, and it flickers occasionally when the draft from the window reaches it, sending a brief, quick shiver of shadow across the surface of the paper. But these flickers are so small and so brief that they do not disturb the work. They are like the momentary ripples that a fish makes when it rises to the surface of a pond, present for an instant, and then absorbed back into the general stillness. Ada has folded perhaps 5 dozen envelopes now. She does not count them precisely. There is no need. The stack tells her what she needs to know, and the diminishing pile of unfolded sheets tells her how much remains. She estimates, without really thinking about it, that she has perhaps another hour of work before the pile is exhausted, and this knowledge sits in her mind with the same quiet neutrality as the knowledge that the fire will need tending before she is done, or that the tea in her cup has gone entirely cold. She will not make more tea tonight. The kettle is downstairs, in the small kitchen behind the shop, and the hour is too late for the sound of her footsteps on the stairs to be anything but intrusive in the deep quiet that has settled over the building. She will finish the work with the cold tea or with no tea at all, and neither prospect troubles her in the least. The work is enough. The work and the room and the rain and the light are enough, and the small, repeated satisfactions of fold and crease and press are enough, and the knowledge that she is here, in this place, doing this thing on this particular evening in this particular city, is enough. The rain changes slightly. It does not stop or increase or shift direction. It simply changes in the way that rain sometimes changes without any apparent cause, the drops perhaps falling a fraction more softly, or the intervals between them growing a fraction longer, so that the overall effect is of a rain that is thinning without departing, becoming more delicate, more particular, each drop distinct and separate, where before they had been a continuous, blended murmur. Ada notices this change, if noticing is the right word for an awareness that is more physical than mental, more felt than thought. She notices it the way one notices a change in the temperature of bath water, gradually and without alarm, as something that is simply happening and that requires no response. The lane below, glimpsed through the rain-streaked window, has taken on the particular look that wet cobblestones have under lamplight, a dark, reflective sheen that makes each stone seem polished, as though the rain were not merely wetting the surface, but revealing something that had been there all along, hidden beneath the dust and grime of the day. The gas lamp at the corner of the lane, visible from the window as a faint, yellowish glow partially obscured by the building opposite, casts long, wavering reflections on the wet ground, reflections that stretch and shorten with each flicker of the flame, like the slow breathing of something very old and very patient. Ada folds. The paper yields. The bone folder traces its path. These things continue, and in their continuing there is a kind of promise, not a promise of anything in particular, not a promise of change or resolution or arrival, but simply the promise of continuance itself, the assurance that this moment will lead to the next moment, and that the next moment will be very much like this one, and that this gentle, unbroken sequence of similar moments is, in its own quiet way, a form of safety. The fire in the grate needs tending. Ada sets down the bone folder and rises from her chair, moving with the slightly stiff, slightly careful movements of a person who has been seated for a long while and whose body is reminding her, gently and without urgency, that it has other configurations besides the one it has held for the past 2 hours. She crosses the small room in 3 steps and kneels before the grate, reaching for the small brass shovel that hangs from a hook on the fender. She adds coal. Not much. A few pieces, selected from the scuttle with a practiced hand, placed carefully upon the glowing remains of the earlier fire so as not to smother the embers, but to give them something new to work upon. The fresh coal is dark, almost black, with a faint, dull sheen where the lamplight catches its surface, and it sits upon the glowing bed like a small, dark island in a sea of amber. For a moment, nothing happens. Then a thin thread of smoke rises from one of the new pieces, followed by a faint crackle as the heat finds its way into the coal structure. And then, slowly, a small flame appears, tentative at first, then growing, licking upward along the edge of the coal with a pale blue tongue that deepens to gold as it gains confidence. Ada watches the fire for a moment. There is something endlessly absorbing about a fire, even a small one, even a fire in a modest grate in a modest room on a modest lane. The way the flames move, the way they find their paths through the gaps and crevices of the fuel, the way they flare and subside and flare again. All of this has a quality of living intelligence that no other inanimate thing possesses, a quality that invites contemplation and rewards it with nothing more than itself, the simple, ever-changing spectacle of combustion. She returns to her chair. She sits. She picks up the bone folder. She draws a sheet from the pile. And the work begins again, as naturally and as inevitably as breathing begins again after a held breath is released. The diamond shape of the unfolded sheet lies before her. Its 4 points, oriented to the compass of the table, wait for the fold that will give them purpose, the fold that will transform this flat, open, purposeless piece of paper into something closed and purposeful, a container, a carrier, a small and serviceable vessel for the written word. Ada looks at it, and in her looking there is a kind of acknowledgement, brief and wordless, of the transformation that is about to take place, the small but real act of making that her hands are about to perform. The bottom point rises. The fold is made. The bone folder descends. And the rain, gentle and steady and faithful, continues to fall upon the city, upon the lane, upon the window, upon the evening, as it has fallen for hours, and as it will go on falling for hours yet, long after the lamp is extinguished and the fire is burned to ash and the last envelope has been folded and placed upon the stack, and the room has been given over to the darkness and the quiet and the deep, unhurried breathing of sleep. The paste brush rises from the pot. A thin line appears along the edge of the flap, pale and faintly glistening. The flap folds down. The fingers press. And the envelope, the 57th or 58th or 60th of the evening, it scarcely matters which, is done. Done and set aside. Done and forgotten. Done and released into the stack, into the world, into the long, quiet chain of small events that carries a hand-folded envelope from this room to the stationer's counter, from the counter to a customer's hand, from that hand to a writing desk, from the desk to a pillar box, from the pillar box to a sorting office, from the sorting office to a mail coach or a railway car, and from there to another hand, in another room, in another city or town or village where someone will break the seal and remove the letter and read the words within, never once thinking of the woman who folded the paper, who pressed the crease, who applied the paste, who sat in a small, warm room above a stationer's shop on a rainy evening and made, with nothing more than her hands and a bone folder and a pot of flour paste, a small, perfect, unremarkable thing. And that is the quiet grace of it. That is the beauty that lies at the heart of all such work. The work of hands that serve without seeking recognition, that give without expecting thanks, that make without needing to be remembered, is the oldest kind of work and the most honest, and it carries within it a dignity that no amount of machinery or innovation can diminish. Ada folds the next sheet, and the next, and the room holds her, and the rain holds the room, and the night holds the rain, and everything is held, and everything is still, and everything is exactly as it should be, and there is nothing more to want, and nothing more need, and nothing more to do, but this quiet, steady, endlessly gentle folding of paper into envelopes, this small, repeated act of care performed in lamplight, in silence, in the company of rain. Let your breathing slow. Let your thoughts grow soft. Let the fold and the crease and the glide of the bone folder become the last things you hear before the hearing itself becomes a kind of dreaming, a kind of rest, a kind of sleep that is as gentle and as patient as the rain. The pile of unfolded sheets has grown thin now. A dozen remain, perhaps fewer. Ada does not hurry. She will fold them all, each one with the same care and attention she gave to the first, and when the last one is done, she will tidy the table, clean the paste brush, cover the paste pot, set the bone folder in its place, turn down the lamp, bank the fire, and make her way to the small room at the back of this floor where a narrow bed waits for her beneath a quilt that her mother pieced together from scraps of cotton and linen many years ago. Scraps not unlike the rags from which the very paper she folds was made, and she will lie down, and she will close her eyes, and the rain will still be falling, and the night will still be holding, and sleep will come to her as easily and as naturally as a fold comes to a willing sheet of paper. But that is later. For now, there is still work to do, and the doing of it is enough. The bone folder rises. The paper waits. The fold begins. And if, as you listen, you find that you cannot quite tell whether the sound you hear is the whisper of paper folding or the murmur of rain falling or the slow, soft rhythm of your own breathing, then you have arrived at the place this story was always leading you, the place where all quiet things become one quiet thing, and where rest, at last, is not something you must seek, but something you've already found. Thank you so very much for spending this time with us tonight. It has been a true pleasure to share this gentle evening with you, and we hope that the quiet of this small room has brought you a little closer to the rest you deserve. If you have enjoyed this story, you are most warmly welcome to stay with us here at Mystic Sleep Tales, where there will always be another calm and peaceful evening waiting for you. And should you feel moved to leave a quiet word below, we would be grateful for your company. But for now, sleep softly, sleep deeply, and know that all is well.